The stagecoach lurched violently as the front wheel splintered against a hidden boulder, sending 23-year-old Eleanor Hartwell crashing against the wooden frame with enough force to knock the breath from her lungs. She heard the driver's desperate shout, the screaming of horses, and then the sickening crack of wood as the entire coach tipped sideways and tumbled down the rocky embankment in a chaos of dust and splintering timber. When the world finally stopped spinning, Eleanor found herself trapped beneath a section of the overturned coach, her traveling bag split open beside her, its meager contents scattered across the desert floor like forgotten dreams. The two other passengers, an elderly couple from Philadelphia, lay motionless in positions that told Eleanor everything she needed to know about their fate. The driver was nowhere to be seen, though she could hear his horse galloping away in panic, leaving behind only the settling dust and the merciless silence of the Arizona Territory in the summer of 1877. Pain shot through Eleanor's left leg as she tried to move, and when she looked down, she saw her ankle twisted at an unnatural angle beneath the wreckage. She pushed against the wooden beam pinning her down, but it would not budge. The sun blazed overhead with vindictive intensity, and Eleanor knew with absolute certainty that she would not survive the night in this desolate stretch of land between Prescott and Phoenix. Her water canteen had rolled somewhere out of reach, and even if she could free herself, walking on her injured leg would be impossible. She had left Boston 3 weeks ago with such hope, traveling west to accept a teaching position in a small Arizona town, eager to start fresh after her father's business had collapsed and left their family destitute. Now she would die here, alone and forgotten, just another casualty of the unforgiving frontier. Hours passed with agonizing slowness. Eleanor drifted in and out of consciousness, her lips cracking from thirst, her skin burning under the relentless sun. She tried to call out several times, but her voice emerged as barely more than a whisper, swallowed instantly by the vast emptiness surrounding her. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and crimson, Eleanor closed her eyes and prepared herself for the end. She thought of her mother back in Boston, who would never know what happened to her daughter. She thought of the students she would never teach, the life she would never live, the love she would never find. The sound of hoofbeats penetrated her fading consciousness like a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. Eleanor forced her eyes open and saw a rider approaching, silhouetted against the setting sun. She tried to call out again, managing only a weak croak, but somehow the rider heard or saw her because he turned his horse directly toward the wreckage and dismounted in one fluid motion. As he came closer, Eleanor saw a man in his mid-20s with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, sun-bronzed skin, and eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore dusty trail clothes and a leather vest, with a revolver holstered at his hip and a rifle secured to his saddle. "Hold on now, miss," he said, his voice calm but urgent as he knelt beside her and quickly assessed the situation. "I am going to get you out of here." He braced his shoulder against the wooden beam pinning her leg and heaved upward with considerable strength. The beam shifted enough for Eleanor to pull her injured leg free, and she cried out at the fresh wave of pain that washed over her. His hands were careful as he examined her. "One seems was this star, indicate stone dodober, sir, or sister, speaking the door, edicts is the door, embalming hour, state door, in shakis mangor, nearing the bower, scrums or stops passer, sakis the pitchment in this specific pastor, dumpower, it is the book bar, bizarre piece barf, that when the rapper then did or socio or repeating mopispor or sisisor or it has this thinking or indeed the stirrer, then the magmar or stitches. And the Zenius images were careful. As he examined her injury, his touch professional despite the calluses Eleanor could see on his fingers. "It is badly sprained, maybe fractured. You cannot walk on it." He glanced at the dead passengers and removed his hat briefly in respect, before returning his attention to Eleanor. "We need to get you somewhere safe before dark. The nearest town is Creek Bend, about 15 miles southeast, but there is an old line shack about 3 miles from here where we can shelter for the night. I will take you there, tend to your leg properly, and then ride for help in the morning." Eleanor nodded weakly, unable to form words through her parched throat. The cowboy seemed to understand immediately. He retrieved a canteen from his saddle and held it to her lips, letting her drink slowly and carefully. Not too much at once, small sips. When she had drunk enough, he gathered her scattered belongings and stuffed them back into her torn traveling bag. Then he lifted her in his arms as though she weighed nothing and carried her to his horse, a sturdy bay gelding that stood patiently despite the added burden. Getting both of them onto the horse required some maneuvering, but the cowboy managed to settle Eleanor in front of him on the saddle, his arms around her to hold the reins. She leaned back against his chest, too exhausted and pained to worry about propriety. As they rode away from the wrecked stagecoach, Eleanor heard him say softly, "My name is James Colter. You are safe now. I promise you that." The line shack appeared just as full darkness fell across the desert. It was a small, crude structure built of weathered wood and stone, used by ranchers to shelter during roundups or bad weather. James dismounted first, then carefully lifted Eleanor down and carried her inside. The interior consisted of a single room with a stone fireplace, a rough wooden table, 2 chairs, and a narrow cot covered with a surprisingly clean blanket. James settled Eleanor onto the cot and immediately set about building a fire. Within minutes, warm light filled the small space, pushing back the darkness and the chill that came with nightfall in the high desert. "I am going to tend to your horse and bring in some supplies," James said. "Do not try to move. I will be right back." He was true to his word, returning quickly with his saddlebags and a bedroll. From the saddlebags, he produced strips of clean cloth, a small bottle of whiskey, and what looked like jerky and hardtack. He also carried a larger canteen and a small pot, which he filled with water and set near the fire to warm. James knelt beside the cot and looked at Eleanor with those steady gray eyes. "I need to remove your boot and wrap that ankle properly. It is going to hurt." Eleanor nodded her understanding, and he worked as gently as possible, but she still had to bite down on her lip to keep from crying out as he eased the boot off her swollen ankle. He examined it carefully in the firelight, his expression focused and competent. "Definitely a bad sprain, possibly a small fracture. I am going to wrap it tight to keep it immobile." He tore strips of cloth and bound her ankle with practiced efficiency, then elevated it on his rolled-up bedroll. Only after he had finished did James attend to his own needs, unsaddling his horse and rubbing the animal down, before securing it in a small lean-to attached to the shack. He returned with his rifle and barred the door, a necessary precaution in this wild country. Then he set about preparing a simple meal, warming beans in the pot and offering Eleanor some of his jerky, which she chewed slowly, her appetite returning now that the immediate crisis had passed. As they ate in the flickering firelight, Eleanor finally found her voice. "Thank you, Mr. Colter. If you had not come along when you did, I would have died out there." Her voice was still hoarse, but stronger than before. James shook his head. "Just James, please. And you do not need to thank me. Any decent person would have done the same." He paused, studying her face in the firelight. "What is your name, if you do not mind my asking?" "Eleanor Hartwell. I was traveling from Boston to take a teaching position in Cedar Ridge." She felt tears prick her eyes as the reality of her situation hit her fully for the first time. "All my money was in my traveling bag. Everything I owned was on that stage. I had barely enough to make the journey as it was, and now I have lost it all. The stagecoach company will not refund my fare, and I have no way to pay for passage to Cedar Ridge even if I could travel on this ankle." The tears spilled over despite her best efforts to contain them. "I cannot even pay you for your help, for the supplies you have used on me. I have nothing." James moved closer, his expression earnest and kind. "Eleanor, you do not owe me anything. I did not help you because I expected payment." He handed her a clean cloth to wipe her eyes. "Your company is payment enough for me, truly. I would not have left you there regardless of whether you had money or not. That is not how things work, not in my world." His words, spoken with such simple sincerity, touched something deep in Eleanor's heart. She looked at this stranger who had saved her life and saw genuine goodness in his eyes, something she had rarely encountered in her privileged but ultimately hollow life back east. "You are very kind, James, but I still feel terrible accepting your charity. I was raised to pay my own way." "Then think of it as one traveler helping another," James suggested. "Out here, we depend on each other for survival. Today I helped you. Tomorrow, someone might help me. That is just how it is in this territory. He stood and moved to the fireplace, adding more wood to keep the flames burning through the night. You should rest now. Your body has been through a terrible ordeal. In the morning, I will ride to Creek Bend and arrange for a wagon to take you there. The town has a doctor who can look at your ankle properly. Eleanor wanted to protest, to insist that she could not accept more help, but exhaustion overwhelmed her objections. She settled back on the cot, pulling the blanket over herself. James arranged his bedroll on the floor near the fire, positioning himself between Eleanor and the door, a protective gesture that did not escape her notice. As she drifted toward sleep, she heard him humming softly, a melody she did not recognize but found comforting nonetheless. She woke several times during the night, each time finding James awake and alert, keeping watch over the fire and over her. Once, when she stirred from a nightmare about the crash, she found him sitting beside her cot, a reassuring presence in the darkness. "Just a dream," he said quietly. "You are safe. Go back to sleep." His hand briefly touched her shoulder, a gesture of comfort, and Eleanor found herself relaxing under that simple touch. Morning light filtered through the gaps in the wooden walls, waking Eleanor fully. She found James already up and moving about, having clearly been awake for some time. He had water heating for coffee and was preparing more food for breakfast. Not as badly as yesterday. Eleanor, not as badly as yesterday, Eleanor admitted. The wrapping you did helped tremendously. She struggled to sit up, and James was immediately there to help her, propping her against the wall behind the cot. He brought her water to wash her face and hands, a small courtesy that meant everything in their rustic circumstances. Over breakfast, they talked more freely than they had the previous night. Eleanor told James about her life in Boston, about her father's failed investments in railroad stocks that had left the family nearly penniless, about her decision to come west and start fresh where her family's fall from grace would not follow her. "My mother wanted me to marry," Eleanor explained. "There was a widower, much older than me, who offered for my hand. He had money, and my mother saw it as the solution to all our problems. But I could not do it. I could not marry a man I did not love, not even to save my family from poverty. So I found the teaching position and left. My mother has not forgiven me." James listened intently, his eyes never leaving her face. "That took courage," he said when she finished. "Coming all this way alone, choosing your own path instead of the easy one. Not many people have that kind of strength." Eleanor felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. "What about you? James, what brings you to this part of Arizona?" James poured them both more coffee before answering. "I work for the Mason Ranch, about 20 miles south of Creek Bend. I have been there 3 years now, working as a ranch hand and horsebreaker. Before that, I drifted around some after the war." He saw her questioning look and explained, "I served in the cavalry for a couple years before the war ended. I was just 18 when I enlisted, 19 when it was all over. Seemed like I should have been older with all I saw, but that is war for you. Afterwards, I did not want to go back east to Pennsylvania where I grew up, so I came out here looking for work and space to breathe." "Do you like it?" "The ranch work?" Eleanor asked, genuinely interested. "I do," James replied. "It is hard, honest work. The land out here is harsh but beautiful, and there is something satisfying about working with horses and cattle, about building something real with your own hands. Samuel Mason, the rancher I work for, is a good man, treats his hands fairly, pays decent wages. I have been saving my money, hoping to eventually buy a small piece of land of my own, start a horse breeding operation maybe. Nothing grand, just something that belongs to me." Eleanor found herself captivated by the way James spoke, by the quiet determination in his voice. Here was a man who knew what he wanted and was willing to work hard to achieve it, who had seen darkness but chose to focus on building something good. It was so different from the shallow young men she had known back in Boston, men who inherited their positions and spent their time in idle pursuits. "Should keep you warm. Keep that leg, should keep you warm. Keep that leg elevated and try not to move around too much." He hesitated at the door, then added, "I am going to bar the door from outside. You can lift it from inside if you need to, but it will keep anyone from walking in while I'm gone. There are rough men in this territory, and I would rather be cautious." Eleanor felt a flutter of anxiety at being left alone, but pushed it down. "I will be fine. Thank you, James, for everything." She wanted to say more, to express the depth of her gratitude, but the words seemed inadequate. James smiled, that warm, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. "I will be back before you know it. Your company is payment enough for me, remember?" With that, he was gone, and Eleanor heard the sound of his horse riding away. The hours passed slowly. Eleanor used the time to examine her torn traveling bag and take stock of what remained of her belongings. Her clothes were mostly intact, though covered in dust. She had lost some personal items, including a silver locket that had belonged to her grandmother, which grieved her. The small amount of money she had been carrying, perhaps $30, was also gone, likely scattered across the desert floor where she would never find it. Her teaching contract and letters of introduction were crumpled but readable, which was a relief. At least she could still prove her identity and her employment, if she could ever make it to Cedar Ridge. As midday approached, Eleanor began to worry. What if something had happened to James? What if he had decided she was too much trouble and simply abandoned her here? She chastised herself for the uncharitable thought, but fear had a way of breeding doubts. She was just beginning to seriously panic when she heard the sound of horses and wagon wheels approaching. James appeared at the door moments later, and the relief that flooded through Eleanor was so intense it almost brought tears to her eyes. "I told you I would be back," he said gently, reading her expression accurately. Behind him came an older man with silver-streaked hair and a weathered face that spoke of decades on the frontier. "This is Dr. Henry Mitchell from Creek Bend," James introduced them. "I thought he should look at your ankle before we move you to town." Dr. Mitchell was thorough but kind in his examination. He prodded Eleanor's ankle carefully, asked her questions about pain and mobility, and finally pronounced, "A severe sprain, but I do not believe anything is broken. You are lucky, young lady. Another few hours in that sun, and you would have had more than an injured ankle to worry about." He rewrapped her ankle with fresh bandages and gave James instructions for her care. She should stay off that foot for at least 2 weeks, preferably 3. After that, she can begin putting weight on it gradually, but nothing strenuous for at least a month. Eleanor's heart sank. 2 weeks minimum before she could walk, and even then she would need more time to heal fully. How was she supposed to take up her teaching position in Cedar Ridge? How would she support herself during her recovery with no money and no way to work? The hopelessness of her situation crashed over her like a wave. James must have seen her distress because he spoke up quickly. "Dr. Mitchell, does Creek Bend have a boarding house or hotel where Miss Hartwell could stay during her recovery?" "There is a boarding house," the doctor replied, "but I will be honest with you. It is not a place I would recommend for a young woman alone. The clientele tends toward minors and drifters, and the proprietor is not particular about cleanliness or propriety." He paused, considering. "There is another option, though it might be unusual. My wife runs a small boarding house for respectable women, teachers and such. We have a room available currently. Miss Hartwell would be welcome there, though I will be frank that the cost is $2 a week, which includes meals." Eleanor did quick mental arithmetic and felt her stomach drop. Even at that reasonable rate, she could not afford more than a few days, and certainly not the weeks she would need to recover. "I appreciate the offer, Dr. Mitchell, but I am afraid I cannot afford accommodation at present. I lost all my money in the accident." An uncomfortable silence fell over the small room. Dr. Mitchell looked sympathetic, but helpless. Finally, James spoke up, his voice firm. "I will pay for Miss Hartwell's accommodation and care." "No," Eleanor protested immediately. "James, you have already done so much. I cannot possibly accept that. It would be too much." James moved to kneel beside her cot so he could look directly into her eyes. "Eleanor, you do not have another choice. You cannot work with that ankle. You have no money and no other resources. What else are you going to do?" His voice softened. "Please let me help you. I have savings, and this is a good use for them. Once you are healed and able to take up your teaching position, you can pay me back if it makes you feel better. But right now, the important thing is getting you well." "But I do not even know when I will be able to pay you back," Eleanor whispered, her voice breaking. "The teaching position might not even still be available by the time I am well enough to travel to Cedar Ridge. This could take months, and I cannot ask you to support me for months. You are saving for your own land, your own future. I cannot take that from you." James reached out and gently took her hand, his calloused fingers warm against her skin. "Eleanor, money can be earned again. Land can be bought later. But I cannot live with myself if I leave you with nowhere to go and no way to heal. Please, let me do this. Your company is payment enough for me, and I mean that. These past hours talking with you have meant more to me than you know. Out here, human connection is rare, especially connection with someone like you, someone educated and kind and brave enough to remake their entire life." He squeezed her hand gently. "Let me help you, please." Eleanor looked into his storm-gray eyes and saw nothing but sincerity and kindness. Something in her chest tightened and then released, a feeling she could not quite name, but that felt like the beginning of trust, of something deeper. "I do not know how I will ever repay you," she whispered, "but if you are certain, then yes. Thank you, James. Thank you so much." James smiled, and Eleanor felt the warmth of it all the way through her bones. "You do not need to repay me. Just get well. That is all I ask." Dr. Mitchell cleared his throat. "Well then, that is settled. Let us get Miss Hartwell to town and into a proper bed. The trip will be uncomfortable with that ankle, but we will go slow and easy." The journey to Creek Bend was indeed painful. Despite James's best efforts to cushion Eleanor in the back of the wagon with blankets and his bedroll, he rode alongside the wagon, frequently checking on her and stopping whenever the pain became too intense. Dr. Mitchell drove the wagon with experienced care, avoiding the worst ruts in the road. Still, by the time they reached Creek Bend in the late afternoon, Eleanor was exhausted and gray-faced with pain. Creek Bend was a small but respectable town, nestled in a valley where a creek provided precious water year-round. The main street boasted a general store, a saloon, a church, a schoolhouse, and various other businesses. Dr. Mitchell's house stood on a quiet side street, a neat adobe structure with a covered porch and well-tended garden. His wife, Martha Mitchell, proved to be a plump, motherly woman in her 50s who immediately took charge of Eleanor with brisk efficiency. "Poor dear, what an ordeal you have been through," Martha clucked, as James carried Eleanor into the house and up a narrow staircase to a small but clean bedroom on the second floor. The room contained a comfortable-looking bed, a washstand, a wardrobe, and a rocking chair positioned near the window that overlooked the garden. "You just rest now, and I will bring you some proper food. Mr. Colter, you are welcome to stay for supper after all you have done." James accepted gratefully, and over the next hour, Eleanor found herself settled into the most comfortable circumstances she had experienced since leaving Boston. Martha brought warm water for washing, helped Eleanor change into a clean nightgown that Martha loaned her, and served a delicious meal of chicken stew and fresh bread. Dr. Mitchell checked Eleanor's ankle one more time and left laudanum for the pain if she needed it. As evening fell, James came upstairs to say goodbye before returning to the Mason ranch. He stood in the doorway of Eleanor's room, his hat in his hands, looking suddenly awkward. "I will come back tomorrow to check on you, if that would be acceptable," he said. "The Mason ranch is not far from town, and Samuel gives his hands Sunday off, so I will have time." "I would like that very much," Eleanor replied, realizing as she said it just how true it was. "Done. You saved my life and asked nothing done. You saved my life and asked nothing in return. You are a remarkable man." James looked down at his hat, color rising in his tan cheeks. "I am just a cowboy, Eleanor. Nothing remarkable about me. But I am glad I found you when I did, and I am glad to know you are safe now." He looked up, meeting her eyes, and Eleanor saw something in his expression that made her breath catch. "I will see you tomorrow then. Rest well." After he left, Eleanor lay in the comfortable bed and stared at the ceiling, her mind full of the day's events. She had come west seeking a new life, and she had nearly lost her life entirely. But she had also met James Colter, a man whose simple decency and kindness had touched her heart in ways she was only beginning to understand. James appeared the next day just after James appeared, the next day just after lunch. Martha showed him up to Eleanor's room, with a knowing smile that made Eleanor blush. James had cleaned up, she noticed, wearing fresh clothes and with his hair still damp from washing. He carried a small bouquet of wildflowers that he handed to her with endearing shyness. "I picked these on the ride in. Thought they might brighten your room." Eleanor accepted them with genuine delight. "They are beautiful, James. Thank you." Martha brought a glass to use as a vase, and Eleanor arranged the flowers on the table beside her bed. The simple gesture touched her more deeply than any expensive gift she had received back in Boston. James pulled the rocking chair closer to the bed and settled into it. "How are you feeling today? Is the pain any better?" "A bit," Eleanor admitted. "Dr. Mitchell's laudanum helped me sleep through the night, and Martha has been taking excellent care of me. She brought me books to read and has been telling me stories about Creek Bend and the surrounding area. Eleanor paused, then asked the question that had been weighing on her mind. James, I need to send word to the school in Cedar Ridge about my situation. They were expecting me to arrive this week, and I need to explain what happened and ask if they can hold the position until I am well enough to travel. Could you help me with that? I do not know how the mail works here or how to get a message there. Of course, James replied immediately. Creek Bend has a telegraph office. We can send a telegram to Cedar Ridge today if you like. It will be faster than a letter and will let them know your situation right away. Together, they composed a telegram explaining Eleanor's accident and asking about the status of her teaching position. James rode with her in a borrowed wheelchair that Dr. Mitchell provided, pushing her carefully down the main street to the telegraph office. The telegrapher, a wizened old man with spectacles perched on his nose, sent the message and promised to bring any reply directly to Dr. Mitchell's house. After sending the telegram, James wheeled Eleanor around Creek Bend, pointing out various landmarks and introducing her to people they encountered. Eleanor was struck by how well-liked James seemed to be. Shopkeepers greeted him warmly, and several people stopped to chat, their curiosity about Eleanor barely concealed, but their manners too good to pry openly. Insisted on buying Eleanor a few necessities to replace what she had lost in the accident. Despite her protests, he purchased her a new brush and comb, some hairpins, a bar of lavender soap, and a small journal with a pencil. You mentioned you like to write, he said when she objected to the journal. I thought you might want to record your experiences out here. Something to send to your mother, maybe, so she knows you are well. The thoughtfulness of the gesture brought tears to Eleanor's eyes. You listen when I talk, she said softly. Really listen. That is rare, James. What you say is worth listening to, James replied simply, and Eleanor felt that strange tightening in her chest again, that sensation that was becoming increasingly familiar in James's presence. They spent the afternoon together, talking easily about everything and nothing. James told her about life on the Mason Ranch, about the horses he worked with, and the open range where cattle grazed for miles. Eleanor told him about books she loved, about her dream of opening her own school someday, about her complicated feelings toward her mother and her old life in Boston. The conversation flowed naturally, and Eleanor found herself sharing things she had never told anyone, secrets and hopes she had kept locked away in her heart. As the sun began to set, James reluctantly said he needed to return to the ranch. I will come back next Sunday if I can, he promised, but I will send word during the week to see how you are doing. Martha said she would let me know if you need anything. Eleanor caught his hand before he could leave. James, about the money you are paying for my room and board, I cannot just accept it without any acknowledgement. Will you at least let me keep track of what I owe you, so that when I am able, I can repay you properly? James looked at their joined hands, then up at her face. Eleanor, I told you, your company is payment enough for me, I mean that. But if keeping track makes you feel better, then yes, do that. Just know that I will never ask you to repay me. This is a gift, freely given. Why? Eleanor asked, the question bursting out before she could stop it. Why are you being so kind to me? You do not even know me. Out there in the desert, hurt and alone. I found you out there in the desert, hurt and alone. I saw someone who needed help. That was reason enough. But since then, talking with you, getting to know you, I have found something I did not expect. He looked directly into her eyes. I have found someone I want to know better, someone whose company I genuinely enjoy. You are smart and brave and kind, Eleanor. You make me want to be a better man than I am. So, I suppose the honest answer is that I am doing this because I want to, because helping you makes me happy, and because your company truly is payment enough for me. Eleanor's heart pounded in her chest. She had known James for barely 2 days, but she felt more connected to him than to anyone she had ever known. I feel the same way, she whispered, about wanting to know you better, about enjoying your company. I have never met anyone like you, James Colter. James smiled, and it was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. Then, we understand each other. Good. That makes everything simpler. He squeezed her hand gently and then released it, standing up from the rocking chair. I will see you soon, Eleanor. Rest and heal. Let Martha take care of you. After he left, Eleanor sat in the growing darkness, not bothering to light the lamp immediately. Her hand still tingled where James had held it, and her mind replayed every word of their conversation. She had come west to escape an unwanted marriage and start a new life as an independent woman. She had not been looking for love, had not expected to find it. But sitting there in the twilight, Eleanor had to acknowledge the truth to herself. She was falling for James Colter, falling fast and hard in a way that both thrilled and terrified her. The reply to her telegram arrived 2 days later. The school board in Cedar Ridge was sympathetic to her situation, but needed to fill the teaching position immediately. They could not hold it open for the month or more she would need to recover. The news was devastating, but not unexpected. Eleanor read the telegram 3 times, fighting back tears before folding it carefully and placing it in her new journal. Martha found her crying quietly later that afternoon and sat on the edge of the bed, putting a comforting arm around Eleanor's shoulders. "There now, dear. I heard about the telegram. I am so sorry. But you know, Creek Bend has a school too, and I happen to know our teacher is leaving at the end of this term to get married and move to California. The position will be open come September. That is 3 months away, plenty of time for you to heal completely. Why not apply here instead?" Eleanor looked up, hope sparking in her chest. "Do you really think they would consider me? I have the teaching certificate from the state of Massachusetts, but I do not know if it is valid here in the territories." "Territory schools are not too particular about such things," Martha assured her. "If you can read and write and cipher, and you have a certificate from anywhere, they will likely hire you, and Dr. Mitchell and I would be happy to vouch for your character. We could introduce you to the school board president this Sunday after church if you feel up to it." "Yes," Eleanor said immediately. "Yes, please. Thank you, Martha. You and the doctor have been so kind to me. I do not know what I would have done without you." Martha patted her hand. "We are happy to help, dear, and James is covering your expenses anyway, so it is no hardship on us. That young man is quite taken with you, you know. I have known James Colter for 3 years now, and I have never seen him pay attention to a woman the way he does to you. He is a good man, Eleanor, one of the best." Eleanor felt her cheeks warm. "He has been very kind." "It is more than kindness," Martha said with a knowing smile. "But you will figure that out in your own time. Now, let me bring you some supper, and then we can discuss what you might wear to meet the school board. We are about the same size, and I have a nice dress that would suit you perfectly." That Sunday, Eleanor met with the Creek Bend School Board, a group consisting of the minister, a rancher, and the owner of the general store. They interviewed her in the church parlor after the service, asking about her education, her teaching philosophy, and her experience. Eleanor answered honestly, explaining that she had taught Sunday school in Boston and had tutored children in her neighborhood, though she had never held a formal teaching position. She showed them her teaching certificate and letters of recommendation from prominent Boston families. The interview went well, and the board president, Minister Carlson, told her they would have a decision within the week. Eleanor left the meeting feeling cautiously optimistic. If she could secure this position, she would have a way to support herself and eventually repay James for all he had done for her. James had been at church that morning, sitting in the back pew in his Sunday best, his hair neatly combed and his face freshly shaved. Eleanor had spotted him immediately when Martha had wheeled her into the church, and their eyes had met across the crowded room. The smile he gave her had warmed her all through the service. After her meeting with the school board, he was waiting outside, and they spent the afternoon together again, this time in the Mitchell's garden, where the shade and breeze made the summer heat bearable. "How did the interview go?" James asked as he helped Eleanor settle into a comfortable chair with her leg elevated. "I think it went well," Eleanor replied. "They seemed genuinely interested, and Minister Carlson said they would let me know soon. Oh, James, I hope I get this position. It would solve everything. I could stay here in Creek Bend, support myself, and repay you for all you have spent on me." James leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his expression serious. "Eleanor, I have told you before, you do not need to repay me. But I admit, the thought of you staying in Creek Bend makes me happy. Selfishly happy, because it means I could see you more often." He paused, seeming to struggle with his words. "I need to be honest with you about something. When I first found you in that wrecked stagecoach, I helped you because it was the right thing to do. Any decent person would have done the same. But now, after these past 2 weeks of getting to know you, my feelings have changed, grown into something more." Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. "James, What are you saying? I am saying that I care about you, Eleanor, more than I probably should after such a short time. I am saying that I think about you constantly, that I look forward to Sundays all week just so I can see you, that the thought of you leaving Creek Bend and going to some other town where I might never see you again makes me feel like someone punched me in the gut. He ran a hand through his hair, mussing it. I know this is fast. I know we have only known each other 2 weeks, but out here, life moves at a different pace. People know what they want and go after it, and I want to court you properly, if you will allow it. I want the chance to see if what I am feeling, what I think we are both feeling, is real and lasting. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. Everything James was saying echoed her own feelings so perfectly. It was almost frightening. I want that too, she whispered. I have tried to tell myself it is too soon, that I am just grateful to you for saving my life. But it is more than gratitude, James. Much more. I have never felt this way about anyone before. When you are here, everything seems right. When you leave, I count the hours until I see you again. If that is not the beginning of real feeling, then I do not know what is. James reached out and took both her hands in his touch gentle but firm. Then we are in agreement. We will court properly, take our time, see where this leads. No pressure, no expectations beyond seeing each other and learning more about each other. Does that sound agreeable to you? More than agreeable, Eleanor said, smiling through the tears that had gathered in her eyes. It sounds perfect. James lifted one of her hands to his lips and pressed a soft kiss to her knuckles, a gesture so tender and romantic that Eleanor felt her heart might burst. Then we have an understanding, Eleanor Hartwell. You have made me very happy today. You have made me happy too, James Colter. Happier than I have been in a very long time. The weeks that followed established a pattern that brought Eleanor more joy than she had thought possible. James visited every Sunday, spending the entire day with her. As her ankle healed and she became more mobile, first with crutches and then with just a cane, James took her on longer outings around Creek Bend. They walked by the creek, attended church socials, and shared quiet afternoons in the Mitchell's garden. During the week, James sent notes with people traveling between the Mason Ranch and town, short messages that made Eleanor smile and hold the paper to her chest like a treasure. Eleanor received word that she had been offered the teaching position in Creek Bend starting in September. Would have a place of her own, meaningful work, and the chance to build a real life in Creek Bend near James. As her ankle healed, Eleanor began helping Martha around the house and with her charitable work in town. She visited the school to meet the outgoing teacher and see the classroom where she would work. She made friends with other women in Creek Bend, including Sarah Mason, the wife of James's employer. Sarah was a warm, intelligent woman in her early 30s who took an immediate liking to Eleanor. James talks about you constantly, Sarah confided one afternoon when she visited Eleanor at the Mitchell's house. Samuel says he has never seen James so happy or so motivated. He is working extra hours to save money faster, and we all know why. He is planning a future that includes you, Eleanor, even if he has not said so directly yet. The knowledge both thrilled and scared Eleanor. She was falling deeply in love with James. That much she knew with certainty. But the speed of it still occasionally caught her off guard. 2 months ago, she had been in Boston, resigned to spinsterhood, and planning a solitary life as a teacher. Now she was in the Arizona territory, healed from a near-fatal accident, preparing to start a new job, and courting a cowboy who made her heart race every time she saw him. One Sunday in late August, James arrived with a borrowed wagon and a picnic basket. "I have something I want to show you," he said mysteriously. "It is a bit of a ride, but I think you will find it worthwhile." Eleanor, now walking without even a cane, climbed eagerly into the wagon beside James. They rode out of Creek Bend toward the south, following a track that wound through increasingly beautiful country. The late summer landscape was painted in shades of gold and green, with mountains rising in the distance, and the sky an endless blue dome overhead. After about an hour, James turned the wagon off the main track onto a smaller path that led to a small valley carved by a tributary of the main creek. "This is it," James said, pulling the wagon to a stop on a rise overlooking the valley. "What do you think?" Eleanor stood up in the wagon for a better view and caught her breath. The valley was perhaps 50 acres, lush with grass and scattered cottonwood trees. It was beautiful and peaceful, a little slice of heaven. It was beautiful and peaceful, a little slice of paradise tucked away from the world. "It is gorgeous, James. Whose land is this?" James climbed down from the wagon and helped Eleanor down, his hands lingering at her waist. "It is mine, or it will be officially as of next week. I have been negotiating with the owner for the past month. He is an old rancher who is moving back east to live with his daughter, and he was willing to sell this parcel at a price I could just barely afford with my savings." He looked at Eleanor, his eyes searching her face. "This is what I have been working toward for years, my own land, a place to build a house, start a horse breeding operation, make a real life. I wanted you to see it, to know what my dreams look like." Eleanor walked forward into the valley, her heart pounding. James was showing her his future, his most precious dreams. The fact that he wanted her to see this, to know about it, spoke volumes about his feelings for her. She turned back to face him, shading her eyes against the sun. "Why are you showing me this, James?" James walked toward her, his stride purposeful. When he reached her, he took both her hands in his. "Because I am in love with you, Eleanor Hartwell. I have been in love with you probably since that first day when you looked up at me from that wrecked stagecoach with such courage in your eyes, even though you must have been terrified. I know it has only been 3 months. I know that is not very long by conventional standards. But I know my own heart, and I know what I feel for you is real and true and lasting." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "I love you too, James. I have been trying to be sensible about it, to tell myself it was too soon, but my heart does not care about being sensible. I love you so much it frightens me sometimes." James pulled her closer, his hands moving to cup her face with infinite gentleness. "Do not be frightened. I would never hurt you, Eleanor. I swear that to you." He paused, taking a deep breath. "I am not a wealthy man. I probably never will be. But I work hard, and I can provide a decent life. This land, this valley, could be a good home for a family someday. And I want that family to be with you. I want to marry you, Eleanor. I want to build a house here and fill it with love and laughter and eventually children, if we are blessed with them. I want to spend every day for the rest of my life with you." Eleanor could barely breathe through the overwhelming emotion flooding her chest. "Are you asking me to marry you, James Colter?" "I am," James said firmly. "I know I should wait longer, should court you properly for at least a year, like convention demands. But life out here has taught me not to waste time when something good comes along. I love you, Eleanor. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Eleanor said, the word coming out in a rush. "Yes, James, I will marry you. I would be honored to be your wife." James let out a whoop of joy and swept Eleanor up in his arms, spinning her around until they were both dizzy and laughing. When he set her down, he kissed her for the first time, a soft, sweet kiss that quickly deepened into something more passionate. Eleanor melted into his embrace, feeling like she had finally found where she belonged. "Whole town there. But it will take me a whole town there. But it will take me a few months to build a house on this land, to get everything ready. Would you be willing to wait until the house is built? Maybe a spring wedding?" "I would wait as long as necessary," Eleanor assured him. "Though I confess, I wish we could marry tomorrow." James laughed, the sound full of pure joy. "You and me both, my love. But a spring wedding gives us time to do things properly. Time for you to get settled in your teaching position. Time for me to build us a home worthy of you." He kissed her again, more softly this time. "And it gives me time to save up for a proper ring. The one you deserve, not some cheap band from the general store." "I would not care if the ring came from the general store," Eleanor protested. "All I care about is you." "I know," James said, smiling. "But I care, and I want to give you the best I can manage. So, humor me on this, Eleanor. Let me court you properly for a few more months and give you the wedding you deserve." They spent the rest of the afternoon in the valley, with James pointing out where he planned to build the house, where the barn would go, where they could plant a garden. He talked about his plans for raising and training horses, about eventually expanding the operation if it went well. Eleanor listened and offered suggestions, already imagining their life together in this beautiful place. She could picture children running through the grass, horses grazing peacefully, a house filled with warmth and love. As the sun began to set, they drove back to Creek Bend. James kept one arm around Eleanor the entire way, reluctant to let her go, even for a moment. When they reached the Mitchell's house, James walked Eleanor to the door, kissed her goodnight with lingering tenderness, and promised to return the following Sunday. That night, Eleanor wrote a long letter to her mother in Boston. She told her about the accident, about James, about her teaching position and upcoming wedding. She tried to explain how much her life had changed, how happy she was, how she had found something in the Arizona territory that she never could have found in Boston. She did not know if her mother would understand or approve, but she needed to try to bridge the gap between them. The letter she received back 6 weeks later was shorter than she had hoped, but not unkind. Her mother wrote that she was glad Eleanor was safe and well. She expressed concern about Eleanor marrying a cowboy she had known for such a short time, but she also acknowledged that Eleanor had always been strong-willed and capable of making her own decisions. She ended the letter by saying she hoped Eleanor would be happy, and that perhaps someday they could visit each other again. It was not a wholehearted blessing, but it was not a rejection either, and Eleanor took comfort in that. The fall months passed in a blur of happiness. Eleanor threw herself into her teaching position and found she loved working with the children of Creek Bend. The students ranged in age from 6 to 14, and Eleanor delighted in watching them learn and grow. She earned a reputation as a patient but firm teacher, someone who genuinely cared about her students' progress. The parents in Creek Bend quickly grew to respect and appreciate her. Meanwhile, James spent every spare moment working on their house. He enlisted help from the other hands at the Mason Ranch, and Samuel Mason himself pitched in occasionally, insisting it was the least he could do for one of his best workers. Built it with his own hands. Putting love, built it with his own hands. Putting love and care into every detail. Eleanor visited the valley every Sunday, watching the house take shape and feeling her excitement grow with each visit. She helped choose colors for paint, advised on the layout of the kitchen, and planned where furniture would go. James insisted she have a say in every decision, reminding her that this was her house as much as his. In December, James presented Eleanor with an engagement ring. It was a simple gold band with a small but beautifully cut diamond, and Eleanor loved it more than any elaborate jewel. "It is perfect," she whispered, as James slipped it onto her finger in the Mitchells' parlor. "Absolutely perfect." "Not as perfect as you," James replied, pulling her into his arms. She was comfortable with, but his kisses she was comfortable with. But his kisses and embraces left her breathless and longing for their wedding day. They set the date for late April, after the spring term ended so Eleanor could finish out the school year. The ceremony would be held in Creek Bend's church, with Minister Carlson officiating. Martha Mitchell helped Eleanor plan the details, and Sarah Mason insisted on hosting a reception at the Mason Ranch. The whole town seemed excited about the wedding, and Eleanor was touched by how thoroughly she had been accepted into the Creek Bend community. As winter gave way to spring, Eleanor felt her happiness grow to almost bursting. She loved her teaching work, loved the town she had adopted as home, and most of all, loved James with an intensity that still sometimes surprised her. He had become her best friend as well as her lover, the person she wanted to share everything with. They talked about their hopes and dreams, their fears and insecurities, their plans for the future. Eleanor knew James better than she had ever known anyone, and the more she knew, the more she loved. The house was finished in early April, and James took Eleanor to see it one warm Sunday afternoon. They walked through the empty rooms hand in hand, James pointing out all the details he had included specifically for Eleanor. Extra shelves in the kitchen for her growing collection of recipes, a desk by the window in the spare bedroom where she could prepare lesson plans, a swing on the porch where they could sit together in the evenings. "It is more than I ever dreamed of," Eleanor said honestly, tears streaming down her face as she stood in the middle of the main room and turned slowly, taking it all in. "You built this for us, James, with your own hands. I cannot believe it." "I would build you a palace if I could," James replied, wrapping his arms around her from behind and resting his chin on her shoulder. "But I figured a house filled with love would be better than a palace without it." "Much better," Eleanor agreed, turning in his arms to face him. "I do not need a palace, James. All I need is you." They kissed in the empty house, the afternoon sun streaming through the windows, and Eleanor felt the rightness of it all the way through her soul. This was where she was meant to be. This was who she was meant to be with. Everything that had happened, including the terrible accident that had nearly killed her, had led her to this moment, this man, this life. She would not change a single thing. Woven into her upswept hair, she felt woven into her upswept hair. She felt beautiful and nervous, and so happy she could barely contain it. James waited for her at the altar, devastatingly handsome in a new suit, his eyes bright with emotion as he watched her walk down the aisle. The ceremony was short but meaningful. They exchanged vows in front of the gathered town, promising to love and honor each other for the rest of their lives. When Minister Carlson pronounced them husband and wife, James kissed Eleanor with such tenderness that several people in the congregation dabbed at their eyes. The reception at the Mason Ranch was a joyous affair. There was music and dancing, abundant food, and a festive atmosphere that lasted well into the evening. Eleanor danced with James until her feet hurt, talked with friends until her voice was hoarse, and ate cake until she could not manage another bite. When the evening finally wound down, James lifted Eleanor onto his horse, climbed up behind her, and rode with her to their new home in the valley. They spent their wedding night in the house James had built, making love for the first time with a combination of tenderness, passion, and occasional awkward laughter as they learned each other's bodies. Eleanor had been nervous, having only the vaguest idea of what to expect, but James was patient and gentle, putting her pleasure before his own. By the time they finally fell asleep in each other's arms as the first light of dawn crept through the windows, Eleanor felt utterly cherished and more in love than she had thought possible. The first year of their marriage was one of adjustment and joy. Eleanor continued teaching in Creek Bend, rising before dawn to make the journey into town each day. James worked his land, building up his horse breeding operation, slowly but surely. In the evenings, they came together in the house James had built, sharing meals and conversation and love. They learned each other's habits and quirks, had their first arguments and learned how to fight fair, discovered new depths to their physical relationship, and generally built the foundation of a strong marriage. Eleanor had been married for about 8 months when she began to suspect she might be pregnant. She waited another month, wanting to be certain before she told James. But when Dr. Mitchell confirmed her suspicions in January of their second year together, Eleanor rushed home to share the news. She found James in the barn, working with a young filly he was training. "James," she called out, unable to keep the excitement from her voice. "James, I need to talk to you." James immediately handed the filly's lead rope to one of the ranch hands he had hired to help with the expanding operation, and hurried over to Eleanor. "What is it? Is everything all right? You look flushed." "Everything is wonderful," Eleanor said, taking his hands. "James, I saw Dr. Mitchell today. I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby." For a moment, James just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then a huge grin split his face, and he let out a whoop that sent the horses in the barn snorting and stamping. "Right?" Eleanor laughed at his sudden, "Right?" Eleanor laughed at his sudden concern. "The baby is fine, and I am fine. Dr. Mitchell says I am healthy, and everything looks normal. The baby should come in early August." James pulled her close, his arms wrapped protectively around her. "A baby," he murmured into her hair. "Our baby. Eleanor, you have made me the happiest man alive." He pulled back to look at her face. "How do you feel? Are you scared? Excited? What do you need?" "All of those things," Eleanor admitted. "Mostly excited, though. I want this baby, James. I want to build a family with you." "We will build the best family," James promised. "I swear it. I will be the best father I know how to be." Eleanor knew he would be. She had seen James's kindness, his patience, his capacity for love. Their child would be lucky to have him as a father. She placed her hand over her still flat stomach and imagined the life growing there, a child who would be part her and part James, a living symbol of their love. The pregnancy progressed normally, though Eleanor experienced morning sickness that made the first few months challenging. She continued teaching through the spring term, finally leaving her position in late May when her condition became too obvious to continue. The school board hired a temporary replacement for the fall, with the understanding that Eleanor would return to teaching once the baby was old enough if she wished. James was attentive to the point of being overbearing during Eleanor's pregnancy. He worried constantly about her health, insisted she rest more than she wanted to, and hovered like a nervous mother hen. Eleanor found it endearing even when it was occasionally annoying. She knew his concern came from love, from his fear of losing her or the baby. She reassured him constantly that she was fine, that pregnant women had been having babies since the beginning of time, that Dr. Mitchell said everything was progressing perfectly. On a sweltering August evening, Eleanor's labor began. James rode frantically for Dr. Mitchell, while Martha Mason, who had come to stay with Eleanor for the final weeks of pregnancy, helped Eleanor through the early contractions. By the time Dr. Mitchell arrived, Eleanor was well into active labor, and the doctor pronounced that the baby would come soon. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next morning. Eleanor endured it with as much courage as she could muster, gripping James's hand so hard she left marks and crying out with pain during the worst contractions. James stayed with her the entire time, ignoring Dr. Mitchell's suggestion that he wait outside as most men did. Dr. Mitchell finally said, "One more," Dr. Mitchell finally said. "One more push. Give me one more big push." Eleanor bore down with every ounce of strength she had left, and suddenly the baby was there, crying lustily, a beautiful squalling bundle that Dr. Mitchell quickly cleaned and wrapped. "You have a son," the doctor announced, placing the baby in Eleanor's arms. A healthy baby boy. Eleanor looked down at the tiny red face, the squinting eyes, the little fists waving in the air, and felt her heart expand with a love so fierce it took her breath away. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "Hello, my beautiful boy." James leaned over her shoulder, staring at his son with wonder written all over his face. "He is perfect," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Eleanor, he is absolutely perfect. You are perfect. Thank you. Thank you for this gift." They named him Thomas James Colter, Thomas after Eleanor's father, and James after his own. The baby was healthy and strong, with a good appetite and healthy lungs that he exercised frequently during the night. The first months of Thomas's life were exhausting but wonderful, filled with the joys and challenges of new parenthood. Eleanor and James took turns walking the floor with a fussy baby, marveled at every milestone, and fell even more deeply in love with each other as they watched their family grow. When Thomas was 6 months old, Eleanor made the decision not to return to teaching immediately. She wanted to be home with her son, to not miss any of his important moments. James supported her decision completely, and they tightened their budget to manage on his income alone. The horse breeding operation was doing well enough that they were not struggling, though there was little money left over for luxuries. Neither of them cared. They had each other and their son, and that was more than enough. 2 years later, Eleanor gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Margaret Rose. The labor was faster and easier than it had been with Thomas, and the baby was healthy and alert from the moment she drew her first breath. Thomas, now a curious and active 2-year-old, was fascinated by his baby sister and wanted to help with everything from changing her diaper to feeding her. Life in the valley settled into a comfortable rhythm. James's horse breeding operation continued to grow, gaining a reputation throughout the territory for quality animals. Eleanor kept the house, raised the children, and found fulfillment in building the family she had always dreamed of. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable and, more importantly, happy. The house was filled with love and laughter, with the sound of children playing and the warmth of family. When Thomas was 5 and Margaret was 3, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant again. This third pregnancy was unexpected but welcomed, and in the spring of 1883, Eleanor gave birth to another son, whom they named Samuel, after James's employer and friend. The house was now loud and chaotic with 3 young children, but Eleanor would not have changed it for anything. She watched James with their children and fell in love with him all over again every day. He was patient and kind, playful and loving, exactly the father she had known he would be. As the years passed, the children grew. Thomas showed an early aptitude for working with horses, following his father around the ranch from the time he could walk. Margaret was more interested in books and learning, and Eleanor taught her to read when she was just 4 years old. Samuel was the charmer of the family, with his father's storm gray eyes and a smile that could melt the hardest heart. Eleanor eventually returned to teaching when Samuel started school, taking a part-time position that allowed her to be home when the children were home. She loved being back in the classroom, but equally loved being able to return to her own family at the end of each day. James's business continued to thrive, and they were able to expand the house, adding 2 more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. One evening in late summer, after the children had been put to bed, Eleanor and James sat together on the porch swing, watching the sun set over the valley. "Me?" Eleanor asked softly. "That day in me?" Eleanor asked softly. "That day in the desert when the stagecoach crashed?" "I think about it all the time," James replied. "I think about how close I came to never meeting you, how different my life would be if I had not been riding that particular trail that particular day. It scares me sometimes, thinking about all the small things that had to happen exactly right for us to find each other. I was so frightened that day, Eleanor remembered. I thought I was going to die alone in the desert, and then you appeared, like an answer to a prayer I had not even finished praying. You saved my life, James. You saved mine too, James said quietly. Maybe not in the same dramatic way, but you saved me nonetheless. Before I met you, I was just drifting, working toward a goal, but without any real purpose beyond survival. You gave me purpose. Eleanor, you gave me love and family and a reason to build something that would last beyond my own lifetime. You made me want to be a better man. Eleanor turned to look up at her husband, seeing the lines that time and hard work had etched around his eyes, the silver that was just beginning to appear in his dark hair. He was more handsome to her now than he had been the day they met, because now she knew the depth of his character, the strength of his love. I told you that day that I could not pay you back for what you had done, she said. Do you remember? I remember, James replied, and I told you that your company was payment enough for me. You were right, Eleanor said, though I did not fully understand it at the time. I thought you were just being kind, saying what you thought I needed to hear, but you meant it, did you not? You really did find my company payment enough. More than enough, James confirmed. Your company, your love, your presence in my life has been the greatest gift I have ever received. I meant it then, and I mean it even more now after all these years together. You do not owe me anything, Eleanor. If anything, I owe you everything. Eleanor shook her head. We do not owe each other. We chose each other, and we keep choosing each other every day. That is what love is it not? Not a debt to be repaid, but a gift to be cherished. Exactly, James agreed, pulling her closer. A gift to be cherished, and I cherish you more with every passing day, my love. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. From inside the house, they could hear the faint sounds of one of the children stirring in sleep, and Eleanor felt James tense slightly, ready to go check if needed. But the child settled again, and James relaxed. We have built something good here, Eleanor said after a while. A life worth living, a family worth treasuring. Sometimes I still cannot quite believe it all started with a stagecoach crash and a cowboy who happened to be riding past at exactly the right moment. It was meant to be, James said firmly. I am not usually one for fate and destiny, but when it comes to us, I cannot help but believe we were meant to find each other. You were meant to come west, and I was meant to be there when you needed me. Everything else followed from that. Eleanor nodded, knowing he was right. Their love story had been born from tragedy and chance, but it had grown into something solid and lasting, something that would endure. She thought about the girl she had been when she left Boston, frightened and determined, and so naive about what the frontier would demand of her. She thought about the woman she had become, strong and capable and deeply loved. The transformation had been profound, and she owed it all to the man sitting beside her, the cowboy who had saved her life, and then taught her how to truly live. I love you, James Colter, she said simply. I will love you until the day I die, and beyond if there is anything beyond. And I love you, Eleanor Colter, James replied, kissing the top of her head. Always and forever, my darling, always and forever. They sat together as darkness fell completely over their valley, two people who had found each other against all odds and built a love that would last a lifetime. Inside the house, their children slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they were loved and safe. The horses in the barn dozed in their stalls. The creek whispered its endless song. And on the porch, Eleanor and James held each other close, grateful for every moment they had been given, every chance they had taken, every choice that had led them to this perfect life together. The years continued to unfold with their mixture of joy and challenge, triumph and sorrow. Thomas grew into a fine young man who took over more and more of the horse operation, allowing James to slow down as he entered his 50s. Margaret earned a teaching certificate and took over Eleanor's position at the Creek Bend School when Eleanor finally retired. Samuel left home for a few years to see the wider world, but eventually returned to the valley, bringing with him a wife and plans to build his own house on land James and Eleanor gifted him. Eleanor and James became grandparents, and then grandparents again, as their children married and started families of their own. They watched with pride and joy as their legacy extended into the next generation. The valley that had once held just one small house now had 3, as the Colter family expanded and flourished. On their 25th wedding anniversary, James took Eleanor back to the spot where he had first shown her the valley all those years ago. They stood on the same rise, looking down at the land they had transformed through hard work and love. 3 houses now stood where there had been none. Fences crisscrossed the property, marking pastures where horses grazed peacefully. A large barn had replaced the original small structure. Children played in the yards, the next generation of Colters making their mark on the family land. "What do you think?" James asked, his arm around Eleanor's waist. "Are you satisfied with what we have built?" Eleanor leaned into her husband, marveling at how natural it still felt to be in his arms after a quarter century together. Her hair was more silver than brown now, and lines marked her face, but James still looked at her with the same love and desire he had shown on their wedding day. "More than satisfied," she replied. "I am grateful, James, grateful for every day we have had together, every challenge we have overcome, every joy we have shared. This life we have built is more than I ever dreamed possible." "We are not done yet," James said with a smile. "We have plenty of good years left in us, more grandchildren to spoil, more sunsets to watch from our porch, more mornings to wake up together. I plan to love you for at least another 25 years, Eleanor Colter, and probably longer if I can manage it." "I will hold you to that promise," Eleanor said, standing on tiptoe to kiss him, "because I fully intend to love you for another 25 years and beyond. You are stuck with me, James Colter, for better or worse, in sickness and health, until death do us part." "Best decision I ever made," James replied. "The day I found you in that wrecked stagecoach and you told me you could not pay me back. I knew even then that your company would be payment enough. I just did not realize then how incredibly wealthy it would make me." They stayed on the rise until the sun began to set, talking about their children and grandchildren, reminiscing about their life together, making plans for the future they would continue to share. As twilight painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, they walked hand in hand back down to their house, the home James had built with his own hands more than 2 decades earlier, the place where they had raised their family and built their life. That evening, surrounded by their children and grandchildren who had gathered to celebrate their anniversary, Eleanor looked around the table at all the faces she loved and felt her heart swell with gratitude. She caught James's eye across the table, and he winked at her, that same playful gesture he had used since they were courting. She smiled back, feeling like a young woman in love all over again. Thomas stood and raised his glass. "To my parents," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the sudden quiet. 25 years ago, they started with nothing but love and determination. They built this ranch, this family, this legacy that we all share. They showed us what real love looks like, what commitment means, what it takes to build something that lasts. To James and Eleanor Colter, the best parents anyone could ask for, and the finest example of true love I have ever known. "Here, here," everyone echoed, raising their glasses. Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes as she raised her own glass and met James's gaze across the table. He mouthed the words, "I love you," and she mouthed them back, feeling the truth of them resonate through her entire being. 25 years, 3 children, countless challenges overcome, and her love for this man had only grown deeper and stronger. She thought again of that terrified young woman pinned beneath the wrecked stagecoach, certain she was going to die in the desert. She could never have imagined then the life that awaited her, the love that would transform her, the family she would build. "I cannot pay you back," she whispered across the noise of celebration, knowing James would understand the reference. James smiled, that beautiful warm smile that still made her heart skip. "Your company is payment enough for me," he mouthed back, completing the exchange that had defined their relationship from the very beginning. And it was true, Eleanor thought, as the celebration continued around them. Love was not about debt and repayment, about keeping score or maintaining balance. It was about giving freely and receiving gratefully, about building something together that was greater than either person alone. It was about choosing each other every single day through all the challenges and joys life brought. It was about being there, being present, offering the gift of your company and your heart to the person you loved. That was what she and James had done for 25 years, and what they would continue to do for however many years they had left. They had taken a chance meeting in the desert and transformed it into a love story that would be told to their grandchildren and great-grandchildren, a legacy of devotion and partnership that would inspire generations to come. As the evening wound down and their family began to depart for their own homes, Eleanor and James stood on their porch one more time, waving goodbye and calling out final well wishes. When the last wagon had disappeared down the track and silence had settled over the valley once more, James turned to Eleanor and pulled her into his arms. "Best 25 years of my life," he said softly. "Mine too," Eleanor agreed, "and the next 25 will be even better." They stood together in the darkness, two people who had found each other against impossible odds and built a love that had stood the test of time. The desert that had nearly claimed Eleanor's life had instead given her everything she had ever wanted. The cowboy who had saved her had become her husband, her partner, her greatest love. And the company they offered each other had proven to be the most valuable currency of all, worth more than gold, more precious than any treasure. In the years that followed their 25th anniversary, Eleanor and James continued to thrive. They slowed down as age demanded, spending more time on their porch and less time in active work, but their love never diminished. They held hands during Sunday services, walked together by the creek on warm evenings, and still kissed each other goodnight every single night, without fail. When they celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary, the entire town of Creek Bend turned out for the celebration. Eleanor was now 73 and James 75, both of them silver-haired and weathered by time, but still clearly devoted to each other. They renewed their vows in the same church where they had married, surrounded by 3 children, 8 grandchildren, and 4 great-grandchildren. Minister Carlson had long since retired, and his successor, a young man who had grown up hearing stories about the legendary love of the Colters, performed the ceremony with reverence and joy. 50 years ago, I could not pay you back, Eleanor said during the ceremony, her voice still strong despite her age. You told me my company was payment enough. You were right, my darling. We have paid each other every day with the gift of our presence, our love, our commitment. I would not trade a single moment of our life together. Neither would I, James replied, his gray eyes still as storm-bright as they had been the day he found her. You have been my greatest adventure, my deepest joy, my truest love. 50 years has not been nearly enough, but I am grateful for every day we have had. They kissed to the sound of applause and cheering, 2 old people still deeply in love, still showing the world what true partnership looked like. The celebration that followed was smaller than their 25th anniversary party, as both Eleanor and James tired more easily now. But it was no less joyful, built of the life they had created, as built of the life they had created. As the sun set on their golden anniversary, Eleanor and James sat together on the porch swing that James had installed 48 years earlier. The swing creaked slightly now, its chains worn with use, but it still held them securely. Eleanor's head rested on James's shoulder, and his arm was around her, just as it had been thousands of times before. "No regrets?" James asked quietly. "Not a single one," Eleanor replied. "Everything I have done, every choice I have made since the day I left Boston has led me here, to you, to this life. I would do it all again in a heartbeat." "So would I," James agreed. "Finding you that day in the desert was the best thing that ever happened to me. Loving you has been the privilege of my lifetime." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell, 2 souls so intertwined after 5 decades together that they barely needed words anymore. They knew each other's thoughts, understood each other's silences, communicated in glances and touches that spoke volumes. This was what a lifetime of love looked like, Eleanor thought contentedly. This peace, this deep knowing, this absolute security in each other's devotion. Time moved forward as it always did. Seasons changed, years passed. Eleanor and James grew older still, their steps slower, their memories occasionally unreliable, but their love remained constant. They spent their days quietly, surrounded by family when possible, alone together when not. They rarely left the valley anymore, content to let the world come to them in the form of visiting children and grandchildren. On a warm spring evening in their 54th year of marriage, James Colter passed away peacefully in his sleep. Eleanor's hand in his, he simply did not wake up one morning, his heart having given out sometime during the night. Eleanor, sleeping beside him, as she had for more than half a century, woke to find him gone and knew immediately that a part of her had died with him. The grief was overwhelming, a pain so profound, Eleanor thought it might kill her as well. How did one go on when half of oneself was suddenly missing? How did she face days without James's smile, nights without his warmth, a future without his presence? The family gathered around her, offering comfort and support, but Eleanor felt hollowed out, as though someone had scooped out her insides and left only an empty shell. They buried James in the valley he had loved, on a rise overlooking the land he had bought more than 50 years earlier. Eleanor stood at his grave surrounded by her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, and tried to take comfort in the legacy they had built together. James lived on in their children, in the land they had cultivated, in the love story that would be told and retold for generations. But in that moment, all Eleanor could feel was the crushing absence, the terrible silence where James's voice should be. In the weeks that followed, Eleanor struggled to find her footing in a world without James. She moved through her days mechanically, accepting care from her children, sitting on the porch where they had spent so many evenings together, talking to James as though he could still hear her. Maybe he could, she thought. Maybe wherever he was listening to her rambling stories about the grandchildren, her observations about the changing seasons, her confessions of how much she missed him. But slowly, very slowly, Eleanor began to heal. The sharp edge of grief dulled into an ache she could live with. She found moments of joy again, especially in her great-grandchildren, the newest generation who had never known a world without cars and electricity, but who still loved hearing stories about the old days. She told them about the stagecoach accident, about the cowboy who had saved her, about the love that had grown from that chance meeting. She wanted them to know where they came from, to understand the foundation of love and sacrifice that had built the family they all belonged to. Eleanor lived for 3 more years after James's death. They were peaceful years, spent mostly in the valley surrounded by family. She was cared for lovingly by her children, who took turns staying with her to ensure she was never alone. She enjoyed the sunshine and the flowers, the sound of children playing, the comfort of familiar surroundings. But there was also a sense of waiting, of knowing her time was drawing to a close and not minding overmuch, because it meant she would see James again. On a cool autumn evening, exactly 3 years and 6 months after James had died, Eleanor passed away in her sleep in the same bed where she had slept beside her husband for 54 years. She was 80 years old, and she died peacefully, a small smile on her face, as though she had seen something wonderful just before the end. They buried her beside James in the valley, and the entire town of Creek Bend turned out for her funeral. Stories were told of her kindness, her dedication as a teacher, her role as the matriarch of the Colter family. But mostly stories were told of her love for James, a love so deep and true that it had become legendary in Creek Bend and beyond. Theirs was the kind of love story people pointed to as an example, the kind of partnership that inspired others to hold out for something real and lasting. Thomas stood at his mother's grave and spoke to the assembled crowd. "My parents showed us what love looks like," he said, his voice steady despite his grief. "They showed us that love is not just a feeling, but a choice, a commitment that you make every single day. They chose each other in the desert 57 years ago, and they kept choosing each other every day after that. My father used to say that my mother's company was payment enough for him, and my mother would say the same about him. That is their legacy to all of us, not the land or the horses or even the family we have built, though those things matter. Their real legacy is the example of what true love looks like, what it means to give yourself completely to another person, and build a life together based on mutual respect, devotion, and genuine friendship." As Thomas finished speaking and the crowd began to disperse, the sun broke through the clouds, sending shafts of golden light across the valley. Turned into decades, the Colter family turned into decades. The Colter family continued to grow and thrive, generation after generation living in the valley or nearby, maintaining the horse operation, teaching in Creek Bend schools, contributing to the community. The original house that James had built was preserved as a family museum of sorts, filled with photographs and artifacts from Eleanor and James's life together. Couples getting married in the family would spend their first night there, a tradition meant to invoke the same kind of lasting love that Eleanor and James had shared. The story of how they met became family legend, told and retold with slight variations, but always maintaining the essential truth. A stagecoach crash, a dying woman in the desert, a cowboy who happened to ride past at exactly the right moment. A rescue that became something more, something precious and lasting. "I cannot pay you back," she had whispered, and "your company is payment enough for me," he had replied. Those words, spoken in desperation and kindness, had become the foundation of a love story for the ages. In time, the Arizona Territory became a state. Creek Bend grew from a small frontier town into a prosperous community. The Wild West that Eleanor and James had known slowly transformed into something more civilized, more modern. But in the valley where the Colters had built their legacy, something of that old frontier spirit remained. The land remembered the cowboy who had cultivated it with such care, the woman who had loved it as her home. The wind seemed to carry echoes of their voices, their laughter, their love. And on warm spring evenings, when the light hit the valley just right and the air was soft with the scent of wildflowers, it was said that you could still see them there, James and Eleanor, sitting on their porch swing or walking hand in hand by the creek. Ghosts maybe, or memories, or just the power of love so strong that it left an imprint on the land itself. Whatever the explanation, the Colter descendants knew the truth, that love, like Eleanor and James had shared, never really died. It lived on in the land they had cultivated, in the family they had built, in the example they had set. It lived on in every couple who chose each other despite obstacles, who built lives together based on mutual respect and devotion, who understood that the greatest gift you could give another person was the gift of your company, your presence, your heart. The story of Eleanor and James Colter became more than just family history. It became inspiration, a reminder that love could be found in the most unexpected places, that kindness to strangers could change lives, that two people who chose each other and committed to building something together could create a legacy that would last for generations. Their love story, born from tragedy and chance in the Wild West of 1877, endured long after they were gone, a testament to the power of genuine connection, selfless devotion, and the simple but profound truth that sometimes, just sometimes, the best payment anyone can offer or receive is the gift of their company, freely and lovingly given.